Keep it tight, we gotta go!
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And no, your eyes and ears don't deceive you. I am once again actively making wrestling content. So tell your mother, tell your brother, tell your father, tell your cousin Mark, let the whole family know, friends too. I am back at it once again. And that's why today, we need to talk about Disco Inferno. A statement that has never before been uttered in the history of the English language. The man who some may know as Gifted Glenn Gilberti,
how is he gifted?
Is probably better known as as Disco Inferno. A man who made his career not off his own talent, but instead by leeching off those with significantly more talent than him. Although to be fair, that's not really setting the bar very high. He latched onto and became one of the worst, if not the worst inclusion in the massive NWO faction. A memory that a lot of us wrestling fans would much rather forget. He sandbagged Alex Wright's career by being in a tag team with him. God knows where that guy would be had he not been forced to work with Disco Inferno. And he's currently attached himself to longtime bud Konnan, where he's a fixture on his podcast. Which, by the way, is actually pretty good. No disrespect to K-Dog, would never do that to him. For without him, I wouldn't be known to my own fan base as V-Dog. We also go to the same barber, have a fondness for not shaving our chests and wearing tank tops, and have an affinity for flannels, so nothing but love here for him. My point here being, in terms of Glenn, the guy's a complete parasite. He got over in WCW because he made buddies with the boys in the back. He received weekly paychecks for years by kissing so much ass that 20 years later, his lips are still chapped. And look, I'm gonna be real with y'all. I'm gonna give the guy his due before I give him what is long overdue. Because truthfully speaking, I actually liked Disco Inferno when I was a kid. I liked his theme song and that funny little dance he did. Hell, I even had my own Disco Inferno action figure. You press the lever in the back and then he taunts at you. He couldn't do a wrestling move worth a damn, but I guess that just means that it was a solid likeness. But even with me appreciating the character and the gimmick when I was younger, if he was missing from a show, I wasn't missing any sleep over it. As a matter of fact, I don't think I would have really known the difference. No one ever came to a wrestling show specifically for Disco Inferno. No one has ever said, if we don't see Disco, we riot. It's never happened. He was there, he was a part of the show, and sometimes it wasn't terrible. And that is literally the most I can say for him. I can't tell you a single good match that he's had or move that he did in the ring that impressed me. I just remember him constantly making an ass out of himself for my enjoyment. Something that he still does to this day. The guy was a complete goof. He was fun to point and laugh at. A gimmick that has seemed to cross over into his real life. But nowadays Dipshit Inferno has taken to Twitter to become the proverbial old man yelling at clouds. Talking about all the wrongs in the industry and how things were better back in his day. Calling out wrestlers for doing moves that he could never do. And mocking their alleged lacking physiques. And here's just a taste of what this dated dancing dumbass has had to say. And look, I get it. Look is a part of the job. Part of the job. There's also having good matches, connecting with an audience, mic skills, ability, agility, acting chops. There's a lot that goes into this line of work. But not according to Disco. Because if you don't look like a Greek god, you simply don't belong in a wrestling ring. A statement so stupid that it is easily disproven. Because if look was everything in this industry, Brackus would be a multi-time world champion. Nathan Jones would be a Hall of Famer. Zeus would be the literal god of professional wrestling. Point blank, if you can't acknowledge or appreciate a wrestler's abilities because of the way that they look, then maybe wrestling really isn't for you. Might I suggest competitive bodybuilding? You want oiled up beefcakes? And I'm not talking about Brutus? That's the sport or entertainment for you. No shame in it, not shit talking it. They're obviously doing something that I personally could never do, but that's just not what wrestling is. At least not in its entirety. Maybe he feels that he's the authority on appearance because he's allegedly one of the sexiest wrestlers.
When I was voted Pro Wrestling Illustrated's top 50 sexiest wrestlers.
And all I gotta say is where? How? He's more nose than man now. If Disco wants to discredit other wrestlers due to their appearance, then I say we hold up their work to his and see how he compares. Who cuts a better promo? Disco Inferno or Eddie Kingston? Who do you as a wrestling fan have more fond memories of? Disco Inferno or Rikishi? Who do you think is more athletic? Disco Inferno or Mark Henry? Who had better matches? Disco Inferno or Vader? Who sold more merch? Disco Inferno or Bray Wyatt? Who's won more world titles? Disco Inferno or Mick Foley? And lastly, because I'm getting real sick of repeating his name, already this is more than anybody's said his name in the past 15 years, who is more of a star? Disco Inferno or Dusty Rhodes? And those are just some examples. Umaga, Yokozuna, Bam Bam Bigelow, the list just goes on and on. I could be here all day. Pretty ironic that you call yourself the superior one when you're inferior to everybody who is named. I mean, yeah, sure, if there was a weigh-in between him and those I just put him up against, Disco would absolutely win, hands down. But to be fair, Glenn Gilberti doesn't have things like talent or success to weigh him down like all the people I just previously mentioned. And I gotta ask, does that upset you, Glenn? Knowing that so many of these big guys who you think have no place in the wrestling business have more of a place in that business than you ever did. Here you are, day in and day out, working out your glamour muscles, and yet you've never been as relevant as any of those people I just listed. That's really gotta suck. I'm sorry, my heart goes out to you. I find it funny that this guy is trying to dictate who is and who isn't an embarrassment to the industry, when he's been a punchline to that industry since his debut. Glenn, you did a disco gimmick in 1996. You let your colleagues fart in your face for a laugh, and then you did what to stand up for yourself? It's a little bit late in the game to start acting like you have dignity. I think that ship has sailed. And that ship sailed in 95. So you really missed the boat on that one. I love that you refer to Eddie Kingston as an embarrassment to the business, but you don't have the self-awareness to take a good hard look in the mirror. Although, to be fair to you, if I had to live with the shame of being Dunce Cap Inferno, I wouldn't want to look in a mirror either. Glenn, you're the same guy who pitched wrestling Martians and an Invisible Man. You want to talk about killing the business when you yourself should be brought up on charges for attempted murder. Your biggest supporter was Vince Russo. I think that's really all I need to say. Don't get me wrong, Russo was an idea guy, but he needed a filter. Because when he was left to his own devices, he pushed you. You want to talk about being unprofessional? You once got fired from WCW for refusing to do your job and job to Jacqueline because you thought it seemed unrealistic. But honestly, I would take Jackie in a fight over you 10 times out of 10. I'm more than sure she could fuck you up. And I wish she did. I really wish she did. It's amazing that you have the balls to talk the shit you do about other people being an embarrassment when you were out here using the Stone Cold Stunner as your finish. When Stone Cold was at the height of his career. He was the hottest act of the era, and your Inferno was lukewarm at best. You publicly harassed a widow because you felt you were entitled to information on her recently deceased husband. Glenn, if you're going to be embarrassed by anyone, you should be embarrassed of yourself. The way you handle things and conduct yourself is that of a spoiled child who didn't get their way. You think you're hot shit now because Konnan keeps you relevant. But you're not even smart enough to realize that he placates you for an audience. You are a content-creating clown. Hell, I don't blame him either. I would keep you around too. And it's not because I value you as a person, and it's not because I want to validate your perspective, but it's because you're a joke. Although as time goes on, it's starting to get a little bit more sad than it is funny. And I hate to tell you, but you're aging out of your act, sunshine. Taking to the internet with your edgy takes isn't cute when you're 14. So it's definitely not cute when you're 54. So you know, maybe it's time to grow up. Don't you have something better to do with your time? I can understand how you don't, considering how you have no kids, no wife, no life. Just resentment. Resentment of an industry that passed you by. When meanwhile you should be grateful that you even got to be a part of it. Because had you been in any other era than the era that you came through in, there would be no room for somebody like you. You didn't get your way in the business, so now you're out here taking it out on those who did. They're living the life and getting the run that no one would ever give you. Because despite their alleged lack of muscle, they have an abundance of talent. Something you yourself have never had. You spent so much time in a fictional sport that you're now out of touch with reality. You're out here calling out guys like Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes when they've accomplished more than you ever could. You may not like it, but you do have to live with it. These guys who you chastise have made it to a level that you could never ascend to. How are you gonna look down on them when you have to look up to face them? I find it hilarious that Disco wants to talk about what is and isn't a draw, when even at the height of his career, he couldn't draw flies to shit. But hey, don't take my opinion for it. I've actually asked Twitter if anyone's ever purchased a ticket to a wrestling show because Disco Inferno was on the card. And the results, didn't really vary. Even with that measly 8.1%, I'm still pressing X. And I'm not alone in that either. Your name came from a song, your gimmick came from a John Travolta movie, your finish came from Stone Cold Steve Austin, and your push came from those you knew. You have literally made a career off the backs of others. Disco, you can sit on your high horse all you want, but at what point are you gonna hop off it and come down to reality and realize that you're riding a hobby horse? You were the proverbial nerd who got to sit with the cool kids because you made them laugh. And you were dumb enough to think that that made you one of them. You aren't a knight fighting for the good name of professional wrestling. You're a court jester. You are a legend in your own mind and your own mind alone. And let me tell you something else. In wrestling, when it comes to characters, there are some men who make the gimmick and others whose gimmick makes them. Could you guess which one Glenn Gilberti is? There's a reason he was semi-successful in WCW, but a complete dud everywhere else. And Glenn, if there's anything that you can take from this video, anything at all, because I'm sure it will be brought to your attention somewhere down the line, I just want you to remember this. It's a one true fact of life. You can only talk so much shit with a belly full of Big Show farts. On one hand, his complaints about no selling and trading moves like you're in a video game aren't entirely without merit. Now look, from a certain point of view, I can understand where he's coming from. I also don't think that everyone should wrestle every match like it's WrestleMania, because then they limit how many WrestleManias they could potentially work in the future. I want these guys to have long, successful careers. I don't want to see anybody break their backs and be out of work because they overworked themselves. And hell, I would even agree that I too prefer my wrestling to have more selling and storytelling elements in it. Sometimes less means more, and that's the type of work that captivates me. But just because that's my own preference doesn't make everything outside of it invalid. My opinion isn't the only one out there, and other perspectives are equally legitimate. There's definitely an audience for it, but I'm just not a part of that audience. And that's all there is to it. But for Gavin Glenn Gilberti to open his stupid mouth and spout off that what these guys do in the ring isn't athleticism, just makes me think that this man's IQ has been drastically affected by decades of hairspray seeping into his tragically small brain. Well, either that or he's gone mad from decades of untreated disco fever. And yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure I know exactly what garbage Glenn Gilberti will say. That I'm some overweight fan whose opinion doesn't matter because I've never been in the business. But what this guy fails to realize is that if it wasn't for overweight fans like me, he wouldn't have a business to leech off his whole life. And just because he stepped foot inside a wrestling ring, doesn't make him the pinnacle of wrestling opinion. Because you can't dictate what wrestling should or shouldn't be. You don't get to. The audience does. Business 101. The consumer determines what will be produced. And you know what? I'm sure a big portion of that audience would say that wrestling shouldn't be some Goomba doing the funky monkey on their way to the ring. But you know what? I'd defend his dumb ass on that too. Because I think people even like Disco Idiot has a place in the business. But that's just me. The truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, there isn't just one way to be a wrestler. There isn't just one way to look like a wrestler. Because what you're not understanding here is that if everyone's an Adonis, then no one is. If everyone looks the same, nobody stands out. You're just watching generic Musclehead A take on generic Musclehead B. And who wants that? Other than Disco Inferno, that is. The truth of the matter is that no one took you seriously when you were in the ring, and nobody should take you seriously outside of it either. You were a joke then and you're a punchline now. Your legacy will forever be that of laughter. The difference is that the audience went from laughing with you to laughing at you. As an unwise man once said, tell me when I'm telling lies. Anyway, with all that being said, if you like this video, let me know in the comment section by leaving a comment saying, Disco is dead. I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the knight, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, And you too would like to become a V-generate? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.